The lamps in the imperial tent at Carnuntum burned low, and the emperor, who had not slept well for some weeks, sat with a wax tablet upon his knee, while outside the wind moved through the Pannonian pines and the sentries spoke softly in the dialect of the Danube legions. A messenger had come that evening with a dispatch concerning a subordinate officer, a man whose insolence had now passed from rumor into the written record, and the household waited in the antechamber to learn whether the emperor would write the order of recall or the order of punishment, or some third thing. Marcus instead opened the tablet to a clean panel and began to write, not to the officer, not to the Senate, not to his generals, but to himself. He wrote in the Greek he preferred for such reflections, a passage which we still possess and which in George Long's old translation reads thus: "Begin the morning by saying to thyself, I shall meet with the busybody, the ungrateful, arrogant, deceitful, envious, unsocial. All these things happen to them by reason of their ignorance of what is good and evil." He did not write the order, he wrote the meditation. The order, when it came, was written from a different man than the one who had received the dispatch an hour before. And this difference, this slow turning of the inward weather before any outward act, is what we mean to consider tonight. The principle is this: anger for Marcus is not a force, not an energy, not a heat that the strong man channels and the weak man suppresses. Anger is a judgment. It is a particular kind of mistake the mind makes about the world, and like any mistake, it can be examined, corrected, and, with patience, set down. You will hear, in the speech of our own century, the language of anger management, of letting it out, of healthy expression, of bottling and unbottling, as though the passion were a liquid contained in some inner vessel. Marcus would have found this picture strange. He inherited from his teachers, from Rusticus, and from the writings of Epictetus, a different account altogether. The Stoic does not imagine anger as a substance which is in you and which must go somewhere. The Stoic asks, what did you believe in the moment before the anger came, and is that belief true? Consider the structure of the thing. Someone wrongs you, or appears to. In the briefest instant, faster than thought, as you commonly speak of thought, a judgment forms. This should not have happened. This person has injured me. This matter requires that I be roused. The heat that follows, the tightening of the jaw, the quickness of the breath, is not the anger itself. It is the body assenting to the judgment the mind has already passed. Remove the judgment, and the heat finds no fuel. This is what Marcus means when he writes, again in Long's translation, "If thou art pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs thee, but thy own judgment about it, and it is in thy power to wipe out this judgment now." The sentence is austere. He does not say it is easy to wipe out the judgment. He says it is in your power. The locus of the matter is interior. The work is interior. One must consider what this costs to believe. If anger is a judgment, then anger is, at root, your own. You cannot say the man who insulted you made you angry. He spoke. You judged. The anger followed your judgment as smoke follows fire. The insulter contributed words. You contributed the rest. This account is hard because it returns to you a responsibility you would, in most hours of most days, prefer to set down upon the shoulders of others. And yet Marcus insists upon it, returns to it, circles it across the 12 books of the Meditations as a man might circle a wound he is trying to keep clean. He does not write as one who has mastered the matter. He writes as one who is daily contending with it. We will see, when we examine his life, how often the provocation came, and how often the meditation followed, and how the second was the long answer to the first. The wise man, we are told, does not feel no provocation. He is not stone. He is not the corpse that the cynics sometimes seem to praise. He feels the first motion, what Seneca elsewhere calls the primus motus, the involuntary jolt that any creature feels when struck or startled. What the wise man does not do is consent to the second motion. He does not allow the involuntary jolt to harden into the considered judgment that says, "And therefore I am wronged, and therefore I must strike back." Between the jolt and the judgment, there is a space, and in that space the philosopher lives. So when Marcus writes of anger, you must hear him as describing not a feeling, but a fault in the operation of the mind. To be angry on this account is to have agreed too quickly with a falsehood about the world. It is to have said yes, inwardly, to the proposition that someone has done you a real and lasting harm, when in fact, what they have done is far smaller than you imagine, or far more excusable than you have allowed, or simply a thing which lies outside the small territory of what touches you at all. This is the principle. It is not a strategy for becoming less reactive. It is a claim about what anger is. To understand why this mattered so much to him, you must place him where he was when much of the Meditations was written. He was not in Rome. He was on the northern frontier, in the long, grinding war against the Marcomanni and the Quadi and the other peoples who pressed against the Danube limes. The campaign began in the year 166, when he was already past 40, and it consumed, with interruptions, most of the last decade of his life. He died in 180, probably at Vindobona, which we now call Vienna, or perhaps at Sirmium. He did not see Rome again, in any prolonged way, after the war began in earnest. The conditions were not those one imagines for the writing of philosophy. Picture the camp at Carnuntum, or later at Sirmium. Picture the cold of a Pannonian winter, the rivers freezing and then breaking, the supply trains moving slowly through territory where the loyalty of every village was a question. Picture the plague, the great plague which the soldiers had brought back from the Parthian campaign in the east, the plague which thinned the legions and the cities alike, and which would, by the time of his death, have killed something near a tenth of the population of the empire. Marcus himself was not strong. The ancient sources describe a man of frail constitution, troubled by stomach pains, sleeping poorly, dependent through much of his life upon the preparations his physician Galen mixed for him. He had also the burdens of the office itself. The Emperor of Rome heard petitions, signed orders, judged cases, received embassies. He read dispatches from Britain and from Syria. He wrote in his own hand far more than we sometimes remember, because the imperial chancery did not yet have the apparatus that later centuries imagined for it. The emperor was a man who worked, and Marcus worked under conditions which would have tested the temper of any man, let alone one of fragile health, far from his city, surrounded by death. And around him, always, were people who failed him, officers who drank or lied, senators who flattered, slaves who broke things. His own son, Commodus, growing into the young man who would, after Marcus's death, become one of the most disappointing emperors in the long catalogue of Roman disappointment. His wife Faustina, of whom the sources speak in voices so various that we cannot now know what she truly was to him. His co-emperor and adoptive brother, Lucius Verus, who had died in 169 of what may have been the plague, and whose conduct during the Eastern campaign had been, by the polite consensus of the sources, less than disciplined. Add to this the betrayal of Avidius Cassius. In the year 175, the general Cassius, governor of the eastern provinces, declared himself emperor on the false report that Marcus was dead. The revolt collapsed within months, when Cassius's own officers killed him. But Marcus had to manage the matter, had to travel east, had to receive the head of his former general and refuse to look at it, had to forgive those who had supported the revolt, and refused to read the correspondence that would have given him their names. The historian Cassius Dio reports that Marcus burned the letters unread, saying he did not wish to know who had wished him dead. This is a man with grounds for anger. This is a man whom the gods, if one wishes to speak in such terms, had provided with daily occasions for the passion, whom one could wrong, whom one could disappoint, whom one could betray. And it is from within these conditions that he writes in the second book of the Meditations, the morning exercise we quoted at the beginning. I shall meet with the busybody, the ungrateful, the arrogant. Not, you will note, I might meet. I shall, he expects them. He prepares to meet them as a soldier prepares to meet the cold. The exercise is not an exhortation to think better of his fellow men. The exercise is a forecast, a sober anticipation of what the day will contain. He goes on in that same passage. But I, who have seen the nature of the good, that it is beautiful, and of the bad, that it is ugly, and the nature of him who does wrong, that it is akin to me, not only of the same blood or seed, but that it participates in the same intelligence and the same portion of the divinity. I can neither be injured by any of them, for no one can fix on me what is ugly, nor can I be angry with my kinsman, nor hate him. This is the full structure of the exercise. He prepares to meet the difficult. He reminds himself who they are and who he is. He concludes that injury and anger are both, on examination, mistakes. This is what he is doing in the tent. This is what the wax tablet is for. Now let us look more closely at how the principle operated in his life, because Marcus is not a theorist of anger, but a practitioner. And what makes the meditations valuable is that they preserve the working of a mind upon itself. The first thing one notices, reading the 12 books with care, is how often he returns to this matter. It is not a topic he addresses once and sets aside. He addresses it in Book 2, in Book 4, in Book 5, in Book 9, in Book 11. He addresses it from different angles, with different arguments, as a man who knows that the disease returns and that the medicine must be retaken. One of his favorite arguments is the argument from ignorance. The man who wrongs you, he reasons, does so because he believes, however confusedly, that what he is doing is good for him, or at least not bad. No one chooses evil under the description of evil. The thief takes the purse because he wants the coins and has persuaded himself that taking them is acceptable or necessary or owed. The slanderer slanders because he believes the slander serves some end of his, advancement or revenge, or the small pleasure of being heard. The wrongdoer acts from a false picture of the good. He is, says Marcus, to be pitied rather than hated, as one pities the man who stumbles in the dark because he has not been given a lamp. You may resist this. You may think, Surely some men know they do wrong and do it anyway. Marcus would answer that even such men have persuaded themselves of some justification, however thin, that in their own internal accounting the wrong is repaid, or earned, or compensated. He would not insist that the wrongdoer is innocent. He would insist that the wrongdoer is mistaken, and that anger is the wrong response to a mistake. What is the right response? Instruction, where instruction is possible. Containment, where containment is necessary. Sometimes, and this is the part the modern reader sometimes wishes to skip, punishment, because Marcus is an emperor, and an emperor must keep order. But the punishment is to be administered without anger. He punishes, Seneca says in the treatise De Ira, which Marcus had certainly read, as the physician cuts. The cut is not personal. The cut is what the situation requires. Marcus writes in the 11th book, "The best way of avenging thyself is not to become like the wrongdoer." This sentence, which has been quoted so often that one forgets it is his, is the operational form of the principle. The wrongdoer is mistaken. To meet his mistake with your own mistake, which is anger, is to double the quantity of error in the world. To meet his mistake with your own clarity is to subtract from the total. A second argument he uses often is the argument from the brevity of life. He returns again and again to the smallness of the human span. Soon, very soon, thou wilt be ashes or a skeleton, and either a name or not even a name. And what is a name? Sound and echo. If this is so, then to spend any portion of one's small ration of days in the consuming heat of anger is a kind of squandering, like burning the manuscript to warm the room. Think of the universal substance, of which thou hast a very small portion, and of universal time, of which a short and indivisible interval has been assigned to thee. In so brief an interval, anger is not merely a mistake, it is a waste. A third argument, perhaps the deepest, is the argument from cosmic citizenship. Marcus believed, as the Stoics generally believed, that the universe was ordered by a rational principle, the logos, of which each human soul partook. The man who has wronged you is, on this account, a participant in the same rational order as yourself. To be angry with him is in some sense to be angry with the universe of which you are both members, to refuse the arrangement by which difficult people are placed alongside you, precisely so that you may practice the virtues which difficult people make possible. That which is not good for the beehive, he writes, cannot be good for the bee. And conversely, that which is part of the order of the hive must be accepted by the bee. Now observe what these arguments have in common. None of them denies that you have been wronged. None of them asks you to pretend the slight did not occur, or that the slanderer is not a slanderer, or that the disloyal officer is not disloyal. Marcus is not asking you to revise the facts. He is asking you to revise the judgment that the facts warrant your inflammation. This is the work he does, evening after evening, in the tent. He receives the day, with all its frictions and disappointments, and he sorts through them, and he asks of each, "Does this warrant the rising of my anger?" And he answers, with what must have been at times an extraordinary discipline, "No." Or rather, it does not warrant it, and yet I feel it, and I will sit with the feeling until the judgment beneath it dissolves, and the feeling, having nothing to stand upon, departs. We have records in the ancient sources of his actual conduct. He pardoned, repeatedly, those who had supported Cassius's revolt. He maintained, even when his health was failing and the wars were going badly, a courtesy in his judgments that the historians remarked upon as something noteworthy in an emperor. The historian Herodian, no flatterer, says that Marcus tried in every matter to act according to the philosophy he had studied. He was not perfect. He waged the Marcomannic Wars with the firmness an emperor was expected to show, and the wars were brutal, and the populations on the far side of the Danube suffered as such populations suffered in such wars. He did not free his slaves. He did not extend to the provinces the kind of structural reform that a modern reader might wish a philosopher king to have undertaken. He named his son Commodus as his successor, and history has not been kind to that choice, and may not have been wrong to be unkind. He was a Roman emperor of the 2nd century, and the constraints of that office and that century lay upon him. But within those constraints, in the matter of anger, in the matter of how a powerful man handles the daily provocations of his power, he did the work. He left us the tablets. The tablets show the working. What, then, is the structural lesson he means to leave you with? It is this: anger is not a force you carry within you. Anger is a verdict you pass, and you can pass a different one. Consider what this changes about the inner life. If anger is a substance, then the question becomes, how do I release it safely? Where do I put it? Whom do I tell? How loudly may I let it out? And the answers to these questions, however well-meaning, all presuppose that the anger is legitimate, that it has been earned, that it has rights upon your attention. If anger is a judgment, then the question becomes a different one entirely. Now you ask, what did I believe just now that produced this heat? Did I believe that this person owed me something they have not provided? Did I believe that the world owed me a smoother passage than it has offered? Did I believe that my dignity is so fragile that this small word, this small slight, can damage it? And once the belief is named, it can be examined. And once it is examined, it is very often the case that the belief does not survive the examination. This is the work Marcus is doing. He is not suppressing anger. He is dissolving the judgments out of which anger forms. The difference is not subtle. Suppression assumes the anger is real and right and must be hidden. Dissolution assumes the anger rests on a mistake which, once seen, ceases to compel. Let us be clear about what the principle does not say. It does not say that you should accept mistreatment indefinitely, that you should not act when action is required, that you should not protect what is yours to protect or those who depend upon you. Marcus was an emperor. He waged wars. He passed sentences. The principle does not forbid action. The principle requires that the action proceed from clear judgment rather than from inflamed judgment, from your reason rather than from your heat. The angry man, Marcus would say, acts twice. He acts upon the situation badly because his judgment is clouded, and he acts upon himself also badly because he has consented to a passion which leaves him diminished. The man without anger acts once and acts well because the action issues from the part of him that sees. This is why Marcus speaks of anger as a kind of weakness rather than a kind of strength. The man who cannot control his anger is the man whose judgments are being formed for him by his moods, by the slights of others, by the random weather of the day. He is not the agent of his own conduct. He is the instrument upon which others play. The truly strong man, the man who governs himself, has the harder freedom, the freedom to choose in each instance, what he will agree to and what he will not. You will notice, if you observe yourself with some patience, that anger almost always presents itself as power. It feels in the moment like rising, like the gathering of force, like the readiness to act. This is the deception at its heart. What is actually rising, on the Stoic account, is not your power, but your unfreedom. You are being moved. Something has happened, and now you are doing the thing the something has made you do. And the doing feels like agency, only because the alternative, the steady refusal to be inflamed, is so much rarer that you have lost the taste of it. Marcus's lesson is that the steady refusal is the true power, not the silent endurance of a man who is suppressing what he feels, the genuine inward quietness of a man who has examined the matter and found nothing in it to disturb him. You will not achieve this quickly. He did not. The Meditations are the record of a man who is working at it for decades and is, even in his last years, still working. There is no point at which he writes, "Now I have finished. Now I have mastered the passion." He writes instead the same exercise again. Begin the morning by saying, "Again, this morning. The morning after the night you slept badly. The morning after the dispatch arrived. The morning the news from the south was worse than you had hoped." Begin the morning by saying, "The lesson is the practice. The practice is the lesson." Consider, before you rise from this hour, what you carry. There may be in you tonight a low and patient anger you have been keeping for some time. A grievance you have rehearsed often enough that the rehearsing has become a kind of comfort. A person whose name, when it arrives in your thinking, brings the small tightening that is the body's quiet vote for the judgment your mind has long since cast. Marcus would not ask you to forgive that person tonight. He would not ask you to pretend the thing did not happen. He would ask you only this: to look once at the judgment beneath the heat, and to ask whether it is true, to ask whether the person who wronged you knew fully what they were doing, to ask whether the wrong, examined steadily, is as large as the heat suggests it is, to ask whether your small portion of days is well spent in the keeping of it. He would ask you to consider that the person who wronged you is, like you, a creature of brief duration, who will be ashes soon, and who acted, however poorly, from some picture of the good they had been given by their own confused life. He would not promise you that the heat will go at once. He would tell you that the work is slow, that the same exercise must be done many mornings, that there is no completion to it, only the practice. And he would ask you, as he asked himself in the lamplit tent at Carnuntum, while the wind moved through the pines and the sentries spoke softly outside, this question: what manner of man do you wish to have been when the brief portion of your days is finished? Not what manner of man you wish to be in some distant and improved future. What manner of man you wish to have been, looking back from the end. Because that man, the one you will wish to have been, is being made now, by the judgments you are passing now, by the heat you are consenting to or refusing now, in this hour, in the small choices of attention that no one but yourself will ever see. The tablet is open. The day's dispatches are in. The order has not yet been written. What will you write?